To remain updated with the latest business news, click on the bell icon.
I'd like to represent a small part of this panel and try to understand from this esteemed panel of guests what the D&I, diversity and inclusion agenda is all about and how diversity really works at the workplace. Ashima, I'd like to start off by asking you. Now, I was reading this piece, which happened to be in the Business Today magazine, and it started off talking about how you come from a family of doctors, and you went to med school, you joined med school, then left and pursued, a career in academia and economics. The reason was very interesting. The reason was that a mentor of yours told you that you were in the wrong profession at the wrong time in the wrong country. Has that changed now when we're talking about it in 2022?
No, it was pre-medical I switched from. And that was because I'd gone for voluntary work and I saw a lot of violence in hospitals, controlled violence. And I believe in sort of caring, strengthening, etc., so it didn't suit me. But the mentor had said that about economics, because economics was very male centered at the time when I switched to economics. So today you have a lot of women there, a lot of diversity, but in the early years, when I was in Yale, students there in the Ivy Leagues were on strike because they didn't have any mentor. No female tenured economic faculty was there in the Ivy Leagues, imagine. But today I'm on some boards and so on, and what happens is that women are there on boards, but you're put as a chair of, say, CSR, and this idea of diversity, that as a woman you're going to be more caring and empathetic. So maybe I have been like that, but true diversity, I think, is for women to have freedom to be aggressive if they want to. Mm-hmm. And there's some research which suggests that the reason females are seen as more empathetic is that they play a larger role in bringing up children. And in a way, men are not liberated because they are in 8-to-8 jobs and they don't have the time to participate. So, and again, there's research which shows that women and men, there was much more equality in the very early years when there were hunter-gatherer societies. And with agrarian societies, outside home work became more, productive. And men had a larger share of resources. Women were tied at home. They lost bargaining power in the family and so on. So I see a big change now because of digital, because of the new sort of work from home and outsourcing and distance working. Some women think that it puts more pressure on you because you have to do housework and work. But actually it allows you to maintain your skills. Because the biggest factor that holds women back even today is really looking after children, caring for family members. And so you can do that while maintaining your skills. You can make up for your inability to travel. So I think I'll stop there.
All right. I trust the academic, and you could also give us a little bit about the hunter-gatherers and the history to that as well. Vibha, I'd like to ask you the next question, which is about the representation in corporate boards. And I was reading this Harvard Business Review report, which spoke about how this movement started off sometime in 2003 in Norway. And then other European countries started mandating it as law. And I must confess to the audience, I'm a lawyer who joined the media and still very fascinated with what happened in India in 2013 with the amendment to the Companies Act mandating a woman director on the board. But the criticism to this particular premise is that in the West especially, a lot of that was merely symbolic. And it wasn't necessarily an effective tool for corporate governance. Is that a similar story here in India as well?
So I think, you have to start somewhere. Yes, a part of me did rebel when you have to mandate. But let me take the example. Anjali and I sit on Tata Power board. That board just required one. And now there are two in second term. So hopefully we're doing a decent job, and that's why we're there for the second term. And it starts becoming more than just a rubber stamp. If your female population of whatever industry that you represent is close to 50%, maybe say 45%, and you don't have representation, and not just in terms of gender, it could be various other kinds of diversity, then you're not really listening to that section effectively enough. That's number one. Number two, over a period of time, like I said, you start somewhere, but eventually you start seeing, I think one of the speakers on the earlier panel mentioned, that you leave your gender outside. I think all of us, successful or so-called successful women, don't see ourselves as women. It's how others perceive us. We see ourselves as someone who needs to get on with the job at hand. So I think it doesn't matter you start off somewhere as long as you move the needle meaningfully beyond a token.
Suparna, she mentioned diversity, of course, over there, and the diversity and inclusion agenda that is spoken of a lot with HR practices. But I'd imagine this has to be something which is, well, top to bottom, right? It has to be really ingrained in the ethos or DNA of the organization. Has it been a challenge for you in your role to really get that culture going? How much of this is a cultural challenge?
So, in the earlier panel also this discussion was there of policies and processes being the hardware and the culture being the software. So, if you just take the definition of diversity, it is usually about the representation. So even what you were talking about earlier, the number of women, you can actually mandate and get to diversity by mandate. But if you don't have the culture of inclusion, then that diversity is not going to stick. So you've built the gym, but nobody is using it, nobody gets healthier. So it's really about culture, and in fact, I'd also like to bring up the topic or the word of equity. So diversity will bring you in more women in the organization, but if you don't have a culture of inclusion, they will probably leave, or they'll feel undervalued, or not get opportunities for progress. But even more important is equity. And equity is not the same as equality, which means that, Mr. Kamath was talking about a woman colleague or a woman leader who went home at 1 o'clock. And it may be true in Bombay. It may not be true in a lot of other places. So all things being equal, we do need to correct for the larger, societal challenges. And therefore, the organization has to work on really supporting and sponsoring women to kind of counterbalance existing societal biases, conditioning, and responsibilities for women, which seem to come, women do the heavy lifting in terms of childcare, elder care, and running the household. So culture is important, but it's really, you need to have both. You can't, there are companies where the culture is there, but it's just generally an inclusive culture, nurturing environment, and both men and women do well. But if you don't really work on diversity and you don't really work on equity, then while it is an overall nurturing environment, maybe the gender issue may not get solved.
You raised some very pertinent points, and I want to, extrapolate some of them in a bit. But since you mentioned equity, Parizad, one specific dimension, one aspect of equity is, well, a very simple way of looking at it. Obviously, Suparna touched upon a much wider aspect of it, is, well, pay, right? And disparity in pay. In the sports and entertainment world, this is, well, a much publicized debate. A lot of people like to weigh in on this, that, well, there isn't parity in pay when it comes to men and women. In corporate India, what's your experience been like? I mean, at a consultancy firm especially, is this a genuine concern even when we come to, well, India Inc.?
Well, fortunately not. I've spent 25 plus years in a big four consultancy. Yes, there are times when I've asked for my seat at the table. But fortunately for me, pay parity has never been an issue, because I think most of the multinational accounting firms, they truly believe in meritocracy. Yes, there are, we spoke about stereotypes, we spoke about biases at times in terms of whether a woman is capable to lead a business or is she rather more, beneficial in a support role. There can be stereotypes like this, but I think it's also about our own mindset. Personally, I followed the 3 C's all my life, and I touch 50: courage, compassion, and competence. And I think these 3 tenets, as long as any individual or professional has, in my sphere of profession, pay parity has never been an issue. In fact, a large part of our compensation is variable based. I run a very small business for the last several years of my life. I think it's the amount I put on the table. If I'm a net contributor, my variable pay is higher than my fixed. It allows me to lead a very comfortable life. So fortunately, I have not seen it in my sphere of industry. Largely also because most of the consulting firms are also global headquarter driven. So a lot of, global policies around compensation also trickle down. But having said that, it's a level playing field as far as performance and pay is concerned.
Ashima, I wanted to ask you, when we talk about young people entering the workforce, a lot of us look at someone who's been there, done that, and really established themselves and say, this is my role model. For young men and women entering the workforce, and this is a much broader question, having a role model, is this something which is gender specific, or can this be gender agnostic?
I think it helps to have someone of the same gender who has achieved a lot, because a young girl entering will think that it's possible for her to do it also, because she sees greater similarities. So just to give a funny example, I'd got a fellowship to the US, and Barry Eichengreen, who's a very prolific US professor, was willing to host me. But Berkeley, that time, they were very crowded. So they said, you won't get an office, you'll have to work in the library. And someone else visiting from there said, no, then don't join them, because you won't meet anyone or talk to anyone, because there's, female Lou and male Lou. So there are sort of, ways in which you're more comfortable with women. And if, like, whenever I've achieved something or been appointed somewhere, I get a lot of these congratulatory mails from my younger colleagues, and all of them say that, and a lot of people tell me that also, that they feel that a lot is possible for them. Yeah. But before that, so that is on this issue. I just wanted to touch a little bit on this ability or skills. That is the most important thing. It's not gender and diversity. You may be comfortable with another woman, but ultimately you're going to really achieve things if you know your subject and you are willing to put your knowledge out there wherever it's required. You're clear about that. That's the most important thing. And the other from research is that this pay issue, society has to change, because a lot of families, couples, research shows that when the woman starts earning more than the man, she holds back. Or in school, or in college, when you become conscious of the other sex, you stop competing, say, in maths or subjects where there's a male ego involved. So men also have to change. And that is why I said that women don't have to be empathetic and sacrificing. That's regarded as being female. Perhaps they are that because they're more sensitive, they bring up families. But if women go out and work and men have the option to be there and bring up children, like there's a Raymond ad, the complete man. Men become, so you can specialize. Like someone said that women don't have a comparative advantage in changing diapers. So there are a lot of women who are doing that, who are inherently skilled, who could make huge contributions to society, but they don't have the opportunity to build their human capital. So if a couple were able to specialize according to their skills, if the woman is more capable in the outside world, she goes there, and the man stays more at home. I think society would gain, and that is the true way to get real gender equality.
All points being duly noted, ma'am. I'll make a point, mental note already. Parizad, I think you wanted to come in over there on the role models bit, because I saw the smile as soon as Ashima started speaking.
So I've only had men as role models when in the beginning part of my career. I've always had male bosses who taught me to deal less on compromise and conflicts and focus more on the job at hand. You know, when you're young, you start your career, and in those initial days, there aren't many women professionals in a consultancy. That's changed obviously now. I had a male partner who was my boss who always used to tell me, keep the passion, remove the emotion. He actually taught me to be emotionally resilient. Because when I don't get things my way, particularly in a client service industry, there are a lot of pressures, there are stiff targets. He used to keep repeating, Parizad, keep the passion, remove the emotion. That has stayed with me. But yes, at this stage of my career, I definitely have seen that women as role models sometimes act as magnets to draw the younger women professionals as well, who don't lack on anything, whether potential, performance, attitude, conduct, nothing. At times, there is a dearth of little bit of confidence. I do a lot of leadership panels where I see that attribute coming in even now. So I think, as was just mentioned, that sometimes if you have a woman in a particular position, I've seen a lot of young girls walk up to me asking me to share my story. So role modeling works for the betterment of, getting more and more women leaders to a particular leadership level. I just wanted to share a small snippet. I'm at that stage of my life where KPMG has a mentoring program formally. It's called Empower. And I had a very young male partner who chose me as the mentor. And one of my first questions was, what made you? And of course, our profiles and CVs were attached. And he told me the similar thing that, I've worked a lot with male bosses, but I specifically sought out a female professional as my mentor, just to see, the different perspective, the ability to have empathy in some of the decisions or feedback that he had received in his career. And I thought, I've arrived in life and I had this kind of a person looking out and seeking out for me. But yes, I think more from a confidence building to, for some of the younger professionals to emulate. And as someone said, the sky is the limit. It would be good if women serve as role models and act as a magnet for attracting other younger professionals as well.
Vibha, you'd like to chime in?
Yeah, I do. And that is, my mother who's 80, she's here in the audience, and she is a 64 batch IAS officer. So when I look back in terms of what she's done, and in some places, she's Tamil Nadu cadre, that there was no washroom for women officers. So to fit her, they had to build a washroom to begin with. So since that, I feel I've had a pretty easy journey. And I think that at that point in time, in terms of there were no females around to give her guidance. And I remember her telling me a story wherein two small kids, my brother and I, and my father was also here, was sailing at that time, Merchant Navy. And she said, I'm going to throw in the towel. It was actually her boss, then boss, who counseled her to say, go on leave, your job is safe, come back if you change your mind. And then she served full term. So the point is, whether male or female, we all need mentors. And I think we all have to give back to Parizad's point. So I do, I'm part of a mentorship group, part of Bloomberg's, wherein you're giving back by helping other mid-manager level ladies in buy-side investment on how to just bridge that next level. So that every bit counts, and I think it's gender agnostic.
Suparna?
Yeah. I do agree with, what that mentorship is usually gender agnostic, but I think I'll just narrate a very small anecdote. I had once, about 7-8 years back, gone and spoken on International Women's Day at a company. And there were, after whatever I spoke, there were questions, and there was a young woman who said that, ma'am, you've been in sales and marketing, and you've traveled a lot, and I have a question. How hard is it to do a, traveling kind of sales job when you have young children? And I can't remember the answer I gave. I don't even remember the question was asked. 3 years later, I went back to the same company, and this young woman wanted to specifically meet me, and she said that I told her, yes, you can. And then they were planning a child, she and her husband, and she showed me the picture of her 10-month-old son and said that if I had not heard you that day, I would have quit my job. And when I heard you, I said, if she can do it, so can I. And this works only it will work only for women getting inspired by women. Yes, at an overall, in an idealistic world, women will be also inspired by men. I've had outstanding male mentors who have guided, inspired, motivated me. But I could never ask this question, how did you manage, a traveling kind of sales job with young children? That's a question that a person who has lived that reality, you have to experience it to be able to give a valid and credible, approach.
Ashima, you mentioned the whole piece on stay-at-home dads, and maybe the gents really, well, splitting the responsibility, so to speak. My mum was a doctor, my dad was a broadcaster. They split it literally 7 to 2 shifts to deal with two naughty boys. But now you look at pop culture and you look at how things have changed. It's very acceptable, be it on OTTs in the West or even, well, Bollywood films. And even now when you see some of my friends and colleagues, well, there are concepts like paternity leave. There are top tech companies doing that as well. Stay-at-home dads is here to stay, and that would keep you, well, happy with your argument?
Yes, I think there is progress, and the younger generations now, there's much more equality because of this. And I'm sure your dad is a very sensitive person. Yeah. So it helps in that way. And I would like to say about mentors that I get mails or even male students come and tell me that my work inspires them. But for female students, they say things like that, that you were able to do all this, so therefore we think we can do it also. I think that is why having a female mentor is important. And also just to show, because we saw in the early statistics that despite all the changes, the number of women who are on top and in leadership roles is very, very low. And so there, I think this diversity factor, that as a society we are losing out major skills, major contributions, major different ways of thinking when we don't allow, and that funnel that Mr. Kamath was talking about is important also because you have to have those skills. So you have to have a large number of people entering at lower levels and then reaching the top, continuing through to the top.
But then how do we fix that, Ashima? Because then organizations will have to look at it in a way where some of the things that you guys mentioned on reskilling, and after an employee comes back from leave after a big life event, these are things organizations and HR policies will have to fix. Or has that already begun?
Yeah, I was mentioning the role of technology, right? I mean, Cheryl was saying that women have to give up more caring and so on. That's true, but at the same time, I think it has shown us the power of work from home. In so many corporations now, so they become more open to flexi time. And if you are a working mom and you can be at home, I had a paper which won an award at GDN, which is about a household labor allocation function, how a woman has to put in an input every 4 hours. So because of this, she can't go out and travel or can't do certain kinds of jobs, and her productivity goes down. So therefore, the man has more resources and more power, etc., etc. But with ICT, what you can do is you can keep up your skills in many kinds of jobs. So you can maintain that capital formation and your resources and your ability in your particular field. So I think corporates have to use technology, have to have flexi working, have to have open leave, etc. Some mix of, and this should be for males also. If a man is empathetic or caring and wants to be at home and care for children, he should be given that opportunity also.
Sirs in the audience, work from home for all of us. That's what Ashima is saying. But that said, Parizad, This whole conversation about D&I, diversity and inclusion, I think previous panels alluded to it as well. Do you think it's high time, especially with Gen Z, I feel old now, Gen Z coming into the workforce, and them being largely iconoclastic, breaking old societal norms, be it how they can unabashedly do things on social media, they're very confident when it comes to public speaking as well. With this new workforce coming in, do you think it's high time that we reassess this diversity and inclusion definition, widen the scope to include things like generational diversity or sexual orientation, include these things literally in the spirit of inclusion as well?
So before I go into KPMG policies, I have a 19-year-old cool dude, and my worry is he's going to be a stay-at-home son as long as mama works. That's my biggest worry these days, okay? I did ask him once, as you talk of Gen Z, I don't know what came over me. I asked him once that, what is it, would you have any issues in, working, reporting to a women boss? He shrugged his shoulders, looked at me, thought I was insane. And he has a problem of plenty. All the friends are girls right now, and they're sort of in my home all the time. But coming to the specific point of, I think let me talk about, at least we as a firm have our entire diversity and inclusion policies around largely 6 pillars. And you mentioned it, it's not just gender, it's multicultural, multi-generational, LGBTQ, as well as disability. And within that, a lot of reverse mentoring also is taken up as a program where you have young millennial employees who also sit on advisory councils, which includes mentoring, giving their strategic points of view, new age thinking, whether in the boardroom or in the leadership team of the firm. Consciously, and I think, the pandemic has accelerated, and remote working is the best. It's like oxygen for women careers and men careers at this moment. So the lines are really blurred. Coming to specific, I'd like to touch upon certain specific programs that we've run as a firm, which I thought have got great traction even when we populated it on social media. We started Continuum, which I thought was a very good program for returning mothers. Not that we were doing it over a period of time consciously, but we specifically sought out returning mothers who could transition back into the roles that they perhaps played earlier in their life. And we saw great amount of traction there. We have a KPMG network of women. 50% of the members on the I&D Council are our male colleagues who work in day night, day out, as their day jobs, to give the platform to women professionals just to network, know each other as peers and talk about their opportunities and challenges. A lot of live speaking sessions like Talk to Win, whether it's male professionals or women, male and women leaders, just come and talk about the different skills, not just technology and AI, digitalization, conflict resolution, client service, things like negotiation and networking. All this was curated after we listened by way of surveys to the voice of people as well. So I think you're right. I mean, it's not any more gender. KPMG also did a director pulse survey 2021. I'll just briefly touch upon some of the findings. It was interesting to note, and we've discussed that most of the director representations is on account of regulatory pressures, stakeholder activism, and now the ESG principles. But largely, investors are looking across corporates in terms of diversity, not just on gender, but even in skills and experience. I personally serve on the board of the firm for the last 2 years. I chair the People and Culture Committee. And one of the skill sets that we are continuously seeking is technology, cybersecurity, skills as well, irrespective of the gender, just so that it can be blended in the strategy of the firm going forward.
Suparna, at Titan, and now I know what y'all are doing with Wearables, and this is a big push into the future as well, right? This is a legacy company which is now doing some really cool stuff. How have you guys really adapted to some of the things that they've been talking about, like flexi, work hours, work from anywhere, work from home, stuff that millennials and Gen Z are really interested in? And how have people in the workforce responded to that? And have you had any sort of positive feedback when it comes to some of the things we're talking about?
So we have a very diverse workforce. There are the young millennials, and there is a large pool of people for whom work from home is a possibility. There is another very large pool of people, people who work in factories and people who work in brick and mortar stores. There is nothing like work from home. If you're working in a factory, you jolly well be in the factory. So I think for a company like Titan, it's actually managing two parallel tracks of workforce. There is a large percentage of people who are really the solid citizens, the soldiers who are, marching, who have, digital and all of that can't solve the work that they do. And for them, I think the idea is how do we make it better and better working conditions, more flexibility, etc. And then there is the other big pool of people who are working, which is more of a knowledge kind of work, where, of course, I think the last 2 years has shown that, you can actually work very effectively and very productively from anywhere. But one of the things that I do want to point out is that now that almost everybody is back, we do see that while productivity and efficiency was not negatively impacted, in fact, positively in many cases during work from home, because we are a lifestyle company, we create things that people desire, and creative and innovative processes require collaboration and collective work, and that is actually better done in person. But I think what has happened is we've realized that you can do a very good job of hybrid and balance the needs of the organization as well as the needs of the individual.
Thank you so much, Ashima, Vibha, Suparna, and Parizad. It's been a fascinating conversation. I've taken down notes and I've learned a lot through the course of this conversation. Thank you for being a lovely audience.
If you like the video, do like, comment, share, and subscribe.